Did you know the Nasdaq IPO Pulse Index forecasts IPO activity about 6 months in advance? It's a data-driven leading indicator built on 6 key metrics, giving us an early read on the direction of the IPO market. Today on Intelligence Desk, I want to share insights from our latest Nasdaq IPO Pulse Index and what it's telling us about the IPO market. Our last IPO Pulse update was on April 10th, just after a major raft of U.S. tariffs were suspended. At that time, markets had bounced off their lows, but were still around 15% below recent highs. That volatility pushed our IPO Pulse into a downturn, signaling fewer IPOs ahead. But the slowdown in IPOs was part of a wider trend that began last October. In fact, the Nasdaq IPO Pulse peaked last fall and had been slipping since then. The decline accelerated in March and April amid stock market sell-offs, bottoming out at a 1.5-year low this April. While the number of IPOs slowed marginally in the second quarter of 2025, IPO activity has been resilient despite those headwinds. The U.S. saw 108 operating companies IPO in the first half of 2025, the third strongest first half in the past decade. Even more impressive, those IPOs raised a total of $27 billion, up 40% from the first half of 2024. This IPO momentum was broad-based across industries. 10 out of 11 sectors had at least one IPO, and 6 sectors saw 10 or more debuting companies, led by industrials with 29 IPOs. Even SPACs made a comeback with 62 SPAC IPOs in the first half of 2025, which is more than we saw in all of 2023 or 2024. Most of these IPOs chose to list on Nasdaq. In fact, we maintained an over 80% win rate for U.S. IPO listings in the first half of 2025, underscoring Nasdaq's leadership in the market. Overseas, we saw a similar story of resilience. Nasdaq Stockholm's IPO Pulse peaked in mid-2024, dipped to a low by April 2025, and then rebounded by June. Notably, Nasdaq Stockholm hosted the largest European IPO of 2025 and 3 of Europe's top 5 IPOs this year. Thanks to those big listings, capital raised on Nasdaq Stockholm soared over 500% year-on-year in the first half of 2025, even as the broader European IPO market saw declines. With markets recovering from early year volatility and a strong pipeline of companies ready to go public, the recent uptick in the IPO Pulse is an encouraging sign for the second half of the year. If this momentum continues, the IPO slowdown we experienced could prove short-lived as the market regains its stride. Bottom line, despite a brief dip, the IPO market has been quite resilient. The Nasdaq IPO Pulse, ticking back up, suggests better times may lie ahead for IPOs. Thank you for tuning in to this Intelligence Desk update.